This is Meet the Grower. Welcome to another episode. This week, a highly requested guest who may just be high as well. Guys, Green Goblin. Green Goblin, welcome to the show, sir. Huge fan of what you guys do. Definitely stoked to have you on to chat today.
I'm stoked to be here, man. I might be a little medicated right now. That might be the case.
I just came from the smoke shack myself, so you're in good company, sir.
Oh, yeah.
That being said, a couple of housekeeping items off the top. Guys, if you want to support me in the show with what I'm doing, Patreon link down below. And if you like our sponsors, Mars Hydro, well, I've got some links as well in the description. Go check them out. Goblin, let's get into gardening talk. I got a whole bunch of questions to ask you today. But before we go down that road, why don't you tell me a little bit about the man behind the mask? Who is your Nathan Osborne? How did Goblin get to be who Goblin is?
Well, just like anybody, I grew up, went to school, did that whole thing. And I ran across cannabis and I tried it. And I realized that it took care of a lot of the ailments that I had at the time. I had to end up breaking my right leg and spraining both my ankles on a trampoline.
Wow.
And that helped pain relief quite a bit. And not only that, I found it helped me sleep at night and not be, so anxiety filled and whatnot.
Absolutely. So then the path to growing, how did that begin?
Well, I found cannabis and then I realized how much it helped me. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to use this for the rest of my life as a medicine, I'd rather procure it myself. I'd rather grow it myself so I know exactly where it comes from, exactly what it's made of, and what treatments were on the plants, all that kind of stuff. So I started growing.
A lot of the same reasons that I got into it myself, and I can definitely agree with what you're saying. So let's talk about your grow style then. Of course, we know that you're a living soil grower now, doing all sorts of cool stuff with KNF and JDAM, and definitely want to get into talking about that, but has it always been that way, or did you, like most growers, start with a bottle?
I did start with a bottle. At first, I started with Dynagrow, and I got a couple of harvests off of that. And while I was using the Dynagrow, I was constantly reading in forums, and a lot of times when I was looking into it, there wasn't a lot of cannabis-specific information out there. So I would get regular horticulture books and start learning from those as well. And then as I learned more and more, I decided that living soil was more of my ethos, more of what I wanted to do, and the way I like to provide the medicine for myself.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I guess, was there a sort of key turning point when you said, yeah, you know what, the bottle's not for me, I'm diving in both feet or organic, or did you kind of slowly go over a little bit at a time?
It was like a key turning point. I always had to get rid of these excess bales of spent medium
Mm-hmm.
and buy more and more medium, buy more and more nutrients. And I didn't like this whole cycle that was going down. And when I learned about how you can constantly reuse your soil when in a living soil system and, have to have minimal inputs over time, it really rang a bell with me, especially when you were talking about the KNF and Jadam stuff. A lot of these things can be sourced from naturally from around you, especially if you have a decent amount of land and you might have some trees or some wooded areas and whatnot. You can source them directly from your own land.
Yeah, and I think that's something that really attracts a lot of people to it. Is it's a lower cost approach using what's local, what's natural. So tell me then about how you really started first experimenting with KNF and Jadam, and maybe some of the challenges that you faced.
Well, honestly, I started growing with the organic super soil for a few years, and then I just started for the last couple of years getting into the KNF and Jadam and plant fermentation and making your own inputs for your garden. And the biggest hurdle is, honestly, a lot of the information comes from Korea, from Dr. Chow. And he's an awesome scientist, awesome gardener. Um, but there is a language barrier. So sometimes not everything translates. And some of the herbs and things that he uses in his Jadam practice doesn't quite transfer over to where you might be living. So the biggest hurdle, I would say, is that finding the herbs and local plants that serve you in the Jadam and KNF method in your local area, because you're not going to be able to get some of the things that Dr. Chow gets.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So then, again, talking challenges, was there something that you struggled with along the way with the jam, with the KNF? I know that there's a lot of different things involved in terms of making the different mixtures, and time being a key factor.
And that's one of the big factors, obviously, is the time. To get a good KNF system going is probably going to take you 6 months to a year, because you have to go get your harvest your indigenous microorganisms, make your IMO 1, 2, 3, and 4, and start making all these different um, organic inputs for your farm and or garden. So it will take you a little bit of time to get that built up, but once you have that system going, it takes minimal work. A lot like the living soil or a KNF system, or a lot of any soil system or organic grow system. A lot of the work comes in up front, whether that's mixing the soil or preparing the soil or preparing all the organic inputs. A lot of the work comes in up front. So once you have that done, it's just minimal work to keep that going.
Definitely, definitely, and that is like that big soil mix, getting everything started. Talking about your grow space, then I noticed from your videos you've got a very spread out space. You've got a lot of plants going on and stuff, but you're not using massive containers like some people are. So you're definitely living soil. But are you planning on going big bed, full no till eventually?
Um, Eventually, yes. The big hurdle to that is I have 3.5 foot doors, and beds are 4 foot wide, and it's hard to move beds once they're in place. So
Yeah.
you know, planning all that out and making sure everything's good to go is one of the challenges there, honestly.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I can agree with that. I've got the big bed's in a small space and it's tight. It's very
hmm
tight. Talking more about the grow room now. You're out there, you're reaching for that favorite tool. Tell me what it is.
Honestly, the favorite tool that I use is my own five senses: my hands, my sight, the smell. That's my favorite tool to use.
Yeah.
Whether that's smelling the soil to make sure the soil's nice and ready to go, or making sure the plant. I'll do a little stem rub and smell the plant and veg, just for taking notes, and just using all my senses and keeping note of everything that's going on.
Gotcha, gotcha. Sometimes things don't necessarily go according to plan, though, and the grow doesn't go so well. Tell
hmm
me about one of those times, maybe the worst. Some failures that you've experienced as a grower.
Um, One of the worst failures I've had is that for a good probably 6 months, I had spider mites eradicate my whole garden, and that's one of the first biggest hurdles I've had in the garden, is that uh, trying to constantly apprehend or get these spider mites out of my garden. And that's when a lot of the information about the KNF and other type things came about, is because a lot of uh, organic, safe pesticides are really great and useful, but they can become expensive.
Yep.
I like to use a product called Tweetmite Enzyme Cleaner. It's an awesome product, but it can get expensive. So I was looking into how I can make my own, IPM solutions and whatnot. And that's when I came across Jadam and KNF and things like that. And that's when I finally was able to eradicate my problem.
Oh, very good, very good. So, talk a little bit more about your IPM in general then. What do you like to do? You're obviously using a system, going through a couple of different applications of things. Tell me about it.
First and foremost, I want to make sure, like, if I go out hiking or in the garden space outside, that I don't bring any of the clothes and or shoes that I use to do that into my garden space, because that's one of huge vectors of bringing in some kind of pest into your garden. Other than that, I like to, like I said, do the IPM sprays of a few different things. Always use a surfactant, which is usually a Jadam wetting agent,
Yep.
and then either essential oils or a neem solution, or the Tweetment enzyme cleaner. and I'll rotate between those just to like every week I'll rotate between those just to make sure I'm safe before I get into flower.
Totally makes sense, and looks, from the videos that I watched, like you've got a fantastic system in place because your plant's looking super, super healthy, super, super happy.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah. What do you look for in a strain when you're picking out a new cultivar, for example?
First and foremost, I'm always looking for how it grows,
Yeah.
growth characteristics off first and foremost. Because if it is going to give me a hassle in the garden and it's going to take a lot to work with that cultivar, it may not be worth the product, the final product. Not that I'll kill a plant or call a plant immediately, but I'm going to keep my eye on that plant. If it's growing in more of the characteristics I like, which is a little bit more bushy, but with a little bit more internal spacing than a full bushy indica type plant. That's where I try to lean towards.
Okay. Okay.
Um, because I like the lower leaf to calyx ratio. It's easier to cut when you're, you know, harvesting. You don't have to trim as much. There's all kinds of different benefits. That's more what I'm looking for. And then after the growing characteristics, that's when I'm like, does it taste good? Does it have good medicinal benefits for me? Um, does it get me recreationally high? Like that. Then after that, I'm looking at those kind of characteristics.
Yeah, very much, I think, what a lot of us look for, just that solid plant, good smoke, good taste, good terpenes, all that wonderful stuff. So, what do you have going on in the garden right now, then?
I got a new cultivar in the garden right now called Purple Ice Water. I got it from the guys over there at Pheno Hut. They hooked it up. It's from the Bloom Seed Company,
Okay.
and it's supposed to be a really good extract plant, which I'm excited about because I definitely dabble in the extracts, and if it's going to be a good extract plant and get good returns on that, I'm definitely for that.
Talking extracts, then. Are you into the dabbing, the bubble hash? Do you make your own, oils, that sort of thing? Or a mix of all things?
I mean, it's a kind of a mix of all things. Personally, I like to stick with solventless with like a heat press like you got behind you or a bubble hash. Um, Other than that, like I will smoke solvent extracts, but I like to stick to people that know what they're doing and labs
Yeah.
that have the equipment to do it correctly.
Keep it clean.
Yeah.
Goblin, what do you think not enough people know about or should be doing more of in the grow room?
I think a lot of people, especially newcomers into the growing scene, might try to do a little too much. I think they should sit back and watch their plants a little more than do because they'll learn a lot more that way. If you're doing too much at one time, you'll never know what you did changed what. So if you're watering and at sporadic times, you don't know if the watering is your problem. If you don't, you know, if you don't kind of stick to some kind of schedule and not sit back and just watch your plants and how they react to what you're doing, you're not going to become a better gardener over time.
Patience is key in the garden, and small changes can have big effects, and making too many small changes at once can definitely really screw you up. So that's no, I couldn't agree with that more. Definitely good words of advice there. Turning to the industry now, what do you think the industry doesn't do enough of, or could do more of, to help the home grower?
Um, Help us honestly by not lobbying against us for actual home grow. A few states out there are unfortunately going through some troubles on that, where some people in the cannabis industry are lobbying against home growers and against caregivers, and I think that's an unfortunate thing. I think they can, put some of their money that they got from the industry on spreading a light on that and to
Yeah.
maintain that we can at least grow our personal own crop.
And that's the thing. The freedom to grow your own medicine however you want for whomever you want should definitely be a total right and freedom, which then brings about legalization. And up here in Canada, of course, we've now been legal for a couple of years, and it's still sticky. But
Hmm.
you guys are looking like you're making strides down there south of the border. Do you think it's going to happen anytime soon? And what do you think the repercussions will be?
Um, I think in the next year or so, a lot more states are going to come on board than even what we got right now on the medical and rec side. Um, and then next, I don't know, 5, maybe even 6 years, it might become nationally, federally legal. And there's a lot of implications of that in which we don't really know all the answers to yet. Do we let the people incarcerated because of cannabis charges out? Do we give everybody restitution? There's lots of different things that have to be considered once it becomes federally, nationally legalized. Uh, and not only that, we got to be vigilant while that happens because they may try to take away the home growers right during that as well.
That definitely does seem to be a concern. And as more states come online, it's going to hopefully get that stigma pushed a little bit away. But do you think in the next even 10, 15 years, that stigma is going to go away, that we're going to be looking at cannabis like we do alcohol?
I I sincerely hope so. I would say maybe in the next 10 to 15 years that would happen. I mean, it's starting to happen already in certain locations, but to be more like commonplace, I think it would take a little more time.
Yeah, yeah. And some minds will never change, and unfortunately, some people may just have to die off for
Hmm.
that to happen. Yeah, as is life, right?
Yep.
Bringing the conversation back into the grow room, then, somebody who's looking to get into organic gardening, what would you tell them to do to get started out?
First off, I'd tell them to find their local hydro or grow shop because some of them are actually starting to um, carry decent live soils that are readily available for purchase and that you can just start right away. And I would advise them to start right away and start growing some plants and watching those plants grow while they continue to learn, and then they can build their own mix a little bit later and incorporate that into their grow.
No, definitely a good way to go about it. Tell me about your mix. What do you like to use? Are you straight up build a soil, or do you like to mix your own?
Um, I like to buy the Build a Soil Craft blend just because it comes with a lot of the same amendments that I would buy just on my own, and it just comes in a convenient pack. Other than that, I use like the kelp meal, the neem meal, oyster shell powder, insect frass, you know, azomite rock dust, glacial rock dust, basalt rock dust, a little bit of everything
The
because you want minerals from several different types. You want, nitrogen from a few different types. You want calcium from a few different types. So, I mean, usually it's just the mixture of the build of soil and a few other amendments that I buy.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Then I noticed that you didn't say anything regarding animal byproducts. Now, I don't know if you just kind of skipped over that, but some organic growers are against using things like the blood meal or the bone meal. What are your thoughts?
I'm not entirely against the blood meal or bone meals. I will say that please choose your blood meal and bone meals wisely because a lot of them are waste products from the meat slaughtering industry and may not be actually as clean as you would like them to be.
Yes.
I know we are talking about blood and bones, but we still should have a little bit of standards for the organic inputs going into our gardens.
Of course, of course. And it's all one big ecosystem. And personally, I don't see an issue with that because this is, even though a waste product, it has to go somewhere. And if we can bring it back into
Oh
Mother
yeah,
Nature, by all means. But I think, what you were touching on there is a real good point. Things like understanding your sources. Was this cattle raised with antibiotics and hormones and that sort of thing?
mhm,
Stuff that you may not necessarily want getting into your plants.
correct. Yeah, and a lot of those things, unfortunately, even if you don't put them in your plants right away, let's say you're making a compost out of animal manure that animal's been heavily treated with antibiotics and this that it's not going to make that great of a compost, unfortunately, because a lot of the biology that was coming from that cow or coming from that animal is now altered by the medicines that animal is taking, and it will prevent more life from growing in the compost. So the sources are very important.
100%, 100%. Do you make your own compost? Do you vermicompost? What are your
Uh,
sources?
I definitely make my own compost out in the backyard, the grass clippings and leaf droppings, and that's like just a bulk compost. And then you can throw your food scraps in there if you want, and compost those as well. But usually I'm just doing, the correct carbon to nitrogen ratio from falling dead leaves to fresh cut grass.
Huh. Works well, works well. And then worms or just use the compost?
No, worms. Honestly, if you can get 3 or 4 different types of compost, that's the best way to go about it, because each different compost is going to come with its own unique set of microbiology, and it's going to help your soil create structure and longevity by having a diverse micropopulation.
Diversity is key in the grow room. Always say that myself. Back out in the grow room, Goblin. And it's time to do that job that you hate. Tell me about it.
One of the jobs I hate, but it always has to be done, is defoliation.
Ah. Yeah, it takes some work to get in there, and sometimes you get sticky.
You get sticky. It takes some time. It's one of the biggest time sinks, other than maybe mixing the soil, like I was saying at the beginning of the growth cycle. Actually building that soil. That's probably the other biggest time sink, is defoliation there.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree. Well, maybe short of watering. Automated watering or go by hand? What do you prefer?
Right now, I'm going by hand, but I have no issue with going automatic watering. We got busy lives, busy lifestyle. A lot of people that this isn't their main, income branch, so they're going to work and doing other things. They got kids, so especially if you mix, a good organic living soil with a blue mat system or another type system like that, to where it's not overwatering but not yet underwatering, you're going to have a pretty easy automatic system right there.
Yeah, definitely. Have you used any automation systems recently? Have you had any issues with automation systems you'd like to talk about?
Um, the only thing I really use for automation is just like to control the environment, dehumidifier, humidifier, AC kind of stuff. Um, that I did make for a solution for myself because I wanted to, basically.
Right.
Um, I took a Raspberry Pi and I put Home Assistant on there,
Okay.
and I build my own sensors that measure humidity, temperature, and CO2. And I placed them around my garden, and they wirelessly transmit the information back to the Raspberry Pi.
I too have tinkered with the Pi. Actually, the very, very first video we ever did on the channel was doing a grow room controller using a Raspberry Pi. And actually, something to talk about here. I could not really source great parts. I mean, I was buying stuff off Amazon, and that seemed to be the biggest failure. Are you getting Amazon parts? Is there another manufacturer that you like to deal with?
Some parts do come from Amazon, but another good part manufacturer retailer would be DigiKey,
Yep.
and they're a national brand for providing parts to many different industries. Um, and if you type the part number in on their website, it'll come right up, and you can usually get it right from them as well. Um, the failure rates on some of the parts, especially like um, moisture sensors for pots or soil and things like that, that they're pretty bad on the failure rates for those. They're more of a toy than an actual sensor.
Yeah, like the 2302s and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I seem to have a lot of issues with myself. So it's curious to see what's out there and whatnot. What do you like for sources, places on the web to recommend to people to go if they want to learn more about that stuff?
Um, there's another great garden channel called the LED. I believe it's, yeah, LED Gardener,
Okay.
and he has a series on the Raspberry Pi as well. And then there's another person called Doctor Oz, I believe it is, and he does home automation on the Raspberry Pi. It has nothing to do with cannabis, but he does really in-depth walkthroughs on how to set up different stuff with the Raspberry Pi and home automation.
Right on, right on. And I think it's something people should look into if they're not doing some form of automation now. If not just for your environment, watering automation is a great thing. Free up some time in the garden there. Talking more about
Absolutely.
products, then, what product do you think everybody should be using? I mean, pitch it now. Like, what's the greatest thing in the garden that you like to use because it's the greatest thing in the garden that you like to use?
The greatest thing I like to use in the garden is aloe. It
Ah,
has
1 brothers.
101 uses,
Yep.
and whether you're getting a dehydrated aloe from online so that you don't have to grow your own, or whether you have your own aloe plant and you're using fresh aloe, it has so many different uses. It's a wetting agent, it's a surfactant. It helps the plant use its own self-defense systems or immune system. It's called SAR. It helps uptake of nutrients. It helps with drought stress. It has silica and so many different auxins and enzymes in it that it's useful all around the garden.
Oh, that is just awesome. Tell me about some different ways that you'll take the aloe and apply it. Then you just full leaves, mix it direct to the water.
Yeah, I'll sometimes I'll just take a full leaf and I'll chop it up a little bit so that the aloe is bleeding, and I'll throw that whole thing in my 30-gallon reservoir, and 30 minutes later I'll water with that.
Very nice, very nice.
Sometimes I'll actually fillet the entire aloe and chop it up quite nice and throw it in a pump sprayer bottle and foliar with it.
Yep, yep. Foliar feeds. That's something I don't do enough of. What do you like to do for foliar feeds? Are you doing seed sprouted teas as well?
Seed sprouted teas are awesome. They're great for enzymes
Yep.
and all the starter ingredients that you need to get a plant off. That's where it is. It's in that seed. So you're getting all of those when you're using a seed sprout tea.
Yeah, I'm a big fan myself. And you see that explosive growth the next day. If you've not tried them, folks, highly, highly recommend it.
Hmm.
Now, I guess as we're getting sort of to the end of our chat here, tell me about the best grow when everything came together. The environment was dialed in, the genetics were on point, and you had the most massive yield you did, or maybe it was just the best bud.
I'd say that's probably 4 or 5 years ago. Um, I have a cultivar that I still have to this day called Blue Grape, and I everything just ran right with it. The environment was on point the whole time. There was no pest issues. There's no disease issues. Uh, there was no issues with not enough in the soil or anything like that. And it rocked out, and I had the whole entire flower room filled with blue grape, and that was probably one of the best flower like harvests that I've had in a while.
Right on, right on. And it's just awesome when it all comes together like that. Oh, Goblin, I guess last question here as we get to the end of our discussion. What do you think the next big thing for cannabis is going to be?
I mean, I think the next big thing for cannabis and in agriculture in general is this move to a more organic um, growing style.
Yeah.
Uh, The unfortunate thing is by all estimations, we have until like around 2050 until we're out of topsoil in the agricultural sense for growing food and medicine. So the more people that know about growing organic and a living soil or a no-till, they're all are pretty much the same thing. They all use the same principles. The more and more people that can be on that system, the more we can actually regenerate the topsoil and have food, not have food scarcity in the future.
It's very, very scary times that we live in cannabis aside. I couldn't agree more with that message. Organics is one of the greatest saviors of our species. And well, hopefully, guys like you and I can continue to preach that to the masses. Guys, Green Goblin, Awesome chatting with you today, sir. If you guys don't know, he's on a couple times a week on Cannabis Lifestyle TV, as well as his own channel, Green Goblin, and we can find you on Instagram as well. Anywhere else
Yep.
that I'm not aware of?
I do have a Twitch. I'm not very active on it right now, but that will be changing in the near future. And then, I mean, you can always stay a lookout. I do have what videos coming out every week on my channel, and stay on the lookout on CLTV's website as well.
Fantastic. Well, guys, Green Goblin, definitely a pleasure chatting with you today, sir. Hope to have you back again, and now we just got to get Trey on, so I'm going to have to poke him a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, chatting with as many people as I can, because I just love getting everybody's opinions, and everybody has a little bit of a different thing to add. So that being said, Goblin, I'll let you get back at her, sir, because I know you're a busy guy with that big garden of yours. Thank you so much for stopping by and chatting, growing with me.
Not a problem. Not a problem. It was an honor being here, and it was always fun talking with you, man. Always.
Right on, right on. We'll do it again soon. Guys, we out.